My name's Bill Woodall. You probably heard me say in the presentation that I've given that they either call me Bill or Woody. I guess everybody whose name's Woodall or Woodward or something, they end up calling Woody. I'm originally from Morgantown, West Virginia. I spent 3 years in the military, and I spent an additional 35 years with the federal government working for all three branches of the service. Now, I'm one of 10 children. My father, H.C. Woodall, was in Morgantown, West Virginia as a coal miner. I had five brothers and four sisters, and I also had three brothers in the military, and the fourth including me. So we've spent a lot of time in service with our country. I started talking to my father, trying to have him to give me a history of some of the things that happened in his life. And he passed away before he was able to convey to me all the stories that he had during that period of time. So I decided that I was going to write a couple books on an autobiography to outline my life and what I did. Now, what you're going to see here coming up is just one section of my life, and I talk about two different subjects in particular. One is the Cuban Missile Crisis that went through in the early 60s, and how we should be aware of what's around us, and as far as enemies that we have against our country. And the other, I want to talk a little bit about the Vietnam War, which you don't really see a whole lot about now. If you read any of my books now, this is just one excerpt of a chapter in the books I've written here. And if you take a look at the books which I have over here, the picture is my father, Hilbert Woodall, when he was a coal miner. I explain from my life up until I got out of the military in 1958. And then the next book, The Woodalls of Sunset Beach, I got into my experiences and written stories about my experiences up until I got out of the federal service. The next book down, Democracy Hijacked, I talk about different things about in the political arena and things that people normally don't talk uh, about the different happenings that happens in our country as far as the politicians are talking about it today. Now, I've written some stories in there that you're hearing the candidates for president now is talking about today. I also list 26 questions you should ask the candidate you vote for before you make a selection on who you want to be as your president, depending on what your interpretation is and what you want a president to be. The last book that I've written here is it's a lot of fictional stories on it based on real happenings around, such as the Lost Colony down in Virginia. I even got a story about Jack the Ripper. I have a story in here that I talk about UFOs. Are UFOs here or not? What is our beginning? Where do we go later on? Where do we come from? And there's a lot of questions in there kids ask you too, like what happens to me when I pass? And this is kind of a difference from the book. Now, on the cover of it, I've got the remembrance of my wife on there, Patty. So there's a variety of short stories in there, and I think you'll find a lot of them interesting. So if I hope that you all can get on Amazon Kindle and type in my name as the author, and my books will come up. And I think you'll enjoy the stories and the experiences that I had in my lifetime. Thank you very much. My name's Bill Woodall. I spent
38 years with the federal government, including 3 years with the 10th Mountain Division in Germany in the early 50s. I came and went to work at the Pentagon, so I thought when I was young. I knocked on the door and asked for a job, and what I was going to tell you that I started out with the Army, so I've got a few hats here that I put on as we talk about where we've been and where we're going. But I've spent quite a bit of time with the military all through my career. After I went down to the Pentagon and knocked on the door, you know where they sent me? They sent me to the Navy. So I ended up going down on Constitution Avenue, working at the Naval Communications Center in the old munitions building. And it used to be the war building before that. And the communications center that I worked in was the same communications center that's received the incomplete message from General Wainwright when Bataan fell. And I had a copy of that somewhere and I couldn't find it. I wanted to bring that up, but I might get a copy of that and see if I can bring it up here to the museum. Okay, as I left the Navy, from the old teletype machines, you know where I went? I went to the Air Force, at Andrews Air Force Base. So what happened in the Air Force, they were getting away from all the teletype machines, and they opened up a big computer center. Well, I might have that picture around here somewhere. But they opened up a computer center which they called the Automatic Digital Network. And I wanted to talk about some of the civilians that worked serving our country. And these are all of them that worked just to run the Defense Communications Center at Andrews Air Force Base. Now, during that period of time at Andrews Air Force Base, I got tied up into something called the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I was on the receiving end of a lot of the messages, which a lot of people didn't see, that let us know what was going on in Cuba during the JFK years. I was just married and had a kid, and all of a sudden they called me into the office and said, "Bill, we're taking pictures of everybody and we're going to give you ID cards." And I said, "Well, I already got an ID card." And they said, "No, something's come up that we need an emergency relocation site for all the people that's working in this comm center." So what they did, they gave me a civil defense ID card. And the ID card, in case Cuba let loose of all them missiles up here, that it gave me, my wife and my family, the ability to get in my station wagon and head down to Atlanta, Georgia. And they would close all the highways off. See, this is things people don't know. They would close the whole 95 south of all the highways. They would close off going down there. So my wife and I had a big discussion, you know, am I going back to West Virginia, where I really came from to start with, or am I going to take my family and run down to Atlanta, and what if one of them nukes has a short round, then where are we going to be? so I see these short rounds come up because I just heard about Russia shooting a few short rounds landing in Iran over there. So, and throughout my life and career, I found out that I've known a lot of military guys that was killed by short rounds, by missiles and artillery and stuff like this. And I've known quite a few people. So anyhow, I got thinking about what was going on in the missile crisis. Now also my younger brother Tommy worked for the U-2 program with the Air Force. And he suited up the pilots that did the reconnaissance of the U-2 flights over Cuba. So actually, we both was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I don't think the people today really doesn't realize how close we came of getting them missiles shot into us in Cuba. So I've said before that I know how the Israeli people feel now with all the missiles set up for them over there. And then I'm also concerned about the fact that Venezuela is welcoming a lot of the Russian ships down in Venezuela, and I'd really be worried about that, and I am worried about that today. But you'll never hear the president or anybody talk about, what's going on. And of course, Cuba's kind of active. I think if you watch the news, that they're active in Syria now fighting with the Russians. So I've got kind of mixed feelings of how far we should go with this Cuban thing, again, based on my experience now. Now, you can imagine my wife when I come over and say, hey, pack your bags, get the kid. I had to go in the Department of Agriculture to get her because she worked for the Secretary of Agriculture. And then, could I get on the highway? I doubt it. I don't care if you have an ID card or not. But what I'd like to try to cover a little bit tonight is some of the things that you all might have never heard of or never knew of. And that's some of the things that I know. Okay, as we know what happened to the defense communication system, it actually evolved into the internet. And then later on in my career, I was also the Army representative on the development of the internet. And I worked with Defense Communications Agency, and I represented all the Army personnel that was hooking up to what you know today as the internet today. And even back in the 60s, I had a little machine that I took home with me that had a coupler on it that I could call in to Army Materiel Command, which was in Alexandria, and hook up to their computer and work my emails even back in the 60s. And this was back, I think, before Al Gore even invented it. So I just wanted to let you know, that don't believe when they say Al Gore invented the internet. It was done by a lot of people, and most of them came up from DARPA, which was the Defense Research Agency over in Arlington, Virginia. And I know DARPA provides a lot of secure stuff for us as we go. Okay, I was involved also, I'll talk a little bit about Vietnam, since I do have my pictures up here for you all to see. In 1967, my office at the Army Materiel Command, who had in charge of all the Army depots and things like this, where we supplied all the tanks and the trucks and everything to Vietnam. I was down and worked in the headquarters there, and all of a sudden they want to put a team of people together, which is a project called Project Counter. And Project Counter was being organized of experts in all fields. I happen to be an electronics expert, supposedly. You know that when you call you an expert, but they didn't have anybody that could identify electronic and communications equipment, whether it's radar, radio, no matter what it was. And over in Vietnam, they had a depot over there called the 506 Field Depot, which had a bunch of outside storage of all the stuff that we supply all of our soldiers with and everything. And because of the monsoons and the rains, the crates were broken open, the serial numbers was off of them, and they couldn't identify it. So they knocked on our door down there and said, do you have anybody qualified that could come over with this team? And there was about 38 people, civilians, that volunteered to go to Vietnam. I put my name in with another guy, and I got selected because I was in the Army, and it was an Army project, and the guy was in the Air Force, so they didn't take him. So all my training was with the Army. Now they asked if I would go, and I said, yeah. So I had to notify my wife and kids, that I'm going to volunteer to go over there as a civilian. And I thought that if all the draft stuff that was going on of all the young guys, I thought, well, maybe if I go over, that this will keep a couple soldiers from having to go over there in the combat zone. And anyhow, I was wanting to know what was going on in Vietnam myself too. Curiosity killed the cat. You want to see yourself what was going on over there. So anyhow, I was selected, and they sent me down to the Pentagon at the medical center to get my shots. And I didn't mind the shots update. You're in a foreign country, so they got typhus, typhoid. But one shot threw me back. They gave me a shot for the Black Plague because the Black Plague was pretty prevalent around in the Vietnam area over there. So I don't know whether it helped me or not, but I never caught it while I was there. So I guess I can say that's a plus that we had. So then we got the team together, and we left Dallas, flew out to California, got into Travis, flew into Hawaii, into Okinawa. And I had to shave almost 2 times. I was in the air. And Hillary talks about all of her airtime, I bet she didn't have to shave like we did though. So anyhow, we got into Vietnam, and as we were approaching Vietnam, they said, okay, we want you to pull all the blinds down in the airplanes. So we pulled all the blinds down, and it was dark, pitch dark. It was 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And when we landed, the pilot says, okay, when we land, we're going to land quick and fast. And believe me, it felt like you was on an Empire State Building elevator going down. That plane was falling just like it was falling out of the sky. Finally, a few of us took a peep outside, and what we seen outside around Saigon was, this picture here shows these little white things here. These are flares. And we looked out, and we seen the city was all lit up with flares. So we said, okay, and of course the unknown was there. We didn't know what was going to happen to us, so we had all 38 of us on this airplane going into Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base down there. So then when we landed, finally, we were told that the exact spot where we checked in was a place that 4 soldiers got killed by a mortar that came into the Tan Son Nhut airport. And here we was where they cleaned it up, and we're looking around. I don't know whether they're trying to scare us or make us aware. I did find out there was a round went in there and did kill some GIs at that particular time. But again, what I'm trying to tell you is there's a number of civilians other than me who has really risked their lives all over the world in these different situations. So then what happened? They said, well, you can't go into Saigon where we have you quartered, so we're going to put you up in a military barracks right on the post up there at Tan Son Nhut. So we said, well, fine. We got our baggage and got that, and they put us in a little bus and took us over. So they took us into this building. Now, one of the things they told us to bring with us, they gave us a little list of things, and a flashlight happened to be one, and so the whole post was darked out over there. So I went into this building, and this friend of mine also, Phil was his name. He was a GS-15 out of Army Material Command. I think I was a grade 12 at that time. So we found a place in the barracks to sleep, and they had all these cots lined up, all these military cots lined up. Well, when we got in there, we found out that there was a double-stack bunk, just like the old kids in the bunk beds, and you guys been in the Army, you know what I'm talking about with these old beds, okay? And then there was a single bed down here. So Phil, being the old guy, at least I thought he was old because he was in his 50s. So I can reconsider that now. That's not old now. But we gave him the single bunk, and I took the lower bunk on the other side, and the top bunk was empty. So I told Phil I was going to go get a shower, so I went and got all my stuff I needed to get a shower and after the long trip and everything. And yeah, it was about 11 o'clock. So I finally got in with a little flashlight, finding my way back and forth to the building and everything. And I finally got in bed. And I got in there and I laid down. I says, boy, you know, I was really dead tired. I was ready to go right to sleep. But then I noticed the bunk shook, and there was a young soldier that just came in from up country that was an infantry guy. And he was in the bunk on top of where I was sleeping. And I said, well, good, you know, he looked like he was sound asleep. So it went on there for a little while, and then all of a sudden this great big noise hit, and it went BAM! And I was wondering what that was, and I said, my God. And then I looked over, and Phil was laying on this cot, and this young GI hollered, incoming. And when he said incoming, he jumped right on top of Phil. This is our first day in country now, mind you. And another one scared the hell out of me. It scared that Phil, too. And then springs in that bunk was all out of shape into that thing. And I told Phil then, I said, boy, you'll never forget your first day in country. I guarantee you that. So then they took us down the next day. Finally, they gave us some breakfast and took us down and was going to put us in our hotels in downtown Saigon. So I said, you know, it's all interesting. I was in my 30s, but I wasn't in combat before. So any of you guys in combat could probably know what you feel, you know, when you do that and get into that. But anyhow, they put us in a bus, and I noticed the bus that they put us in, we had two of them since we had 38 people. We had military escorts. We had MPs in jeeps in front of us and behind us, and they had their 50 caliber machine guns mounted on these jeeps back there. And I said, well, at least I'll be safe, you know. And we could hear a pop every once in a while around, you know, some little gunfire or something, which nobody really pays much attention unless the big gunfire starts. But anyhow, I noticed on the bus, there's no air conditioning in it. It was just hot as the devil there. It was in its 90s. And they had this big screen around all the windows. We'd open our windows up, and it was actually more like steel. It was similar to chicken wire, but it was all steel mesh. So we asked the bus driver and said, you know, I said, we can open our windows. And he said, yeah, open the windows. And I said, well, what's all this stuff doing on the windows here and everything? He said, well, as we went down through Saigon, Charlie would come by on their mopeds, and they would throw hand grenades into the windows. And said, we came up with a bright idea, you know, if we put the screen on there, the grenades couldn't come in the window because they had some GIs actually killed that way over there. In other words, they drive double on their little mopeds and go by, and one of them would throw a hand grenade knowing that there's GIs in there, you know. So I said, then I feel a little bit safer. And he says, well, don't. And he says, you still watch for the mopeds. And I said, why? He says, well, Charlie now puts fish hooks on the hand grenades and hangs them on the screen. so right then I didn't feel like I was so safe anymore when it came to that. So then we went on downtown. I ended up working on, they called it the 506 Field Depot, where they had a lot of storage up. And so in the mornings, Phil and I, we were roomed together, and we went down and caught the military bus down the post. And then we'd go over to a place called the Hotel Rex. The Rex was an officers' club. And believe it or not, when you went into the Rex up on the top floor, they served all breakfast. The whole top was all laid out. They cook out. They had steaks up there, and it was all laid out for the officers and us civilians that when we came over to do the job we did. So we immediately got picked up when we left our hotel by 4 little Vietnamese kids. Now these kids were no more than 6 to 8 years old at the most. and you say, look around, and mind you now, 68, there was a lot of stuff going on before I got in there. And all these guys were orphans on the street. So they told me, says, hey, we'll escort you and be your friends and walk you from your hotel over to the Hotel Rex to get your breakfast. So we said, fine, you know, what are we going to do? You're not going to throw them away because they're going to stick with you anyway. So one of the things that they told us about when you're in Vietnam or in a country, even if you're a tourist, that they say you watch a couple things. You watch your watch, you watch your wallet. You've been there? How many guys been to Vietnam? Any of you? Good. I think you all know what I'm talking about anyway. But I said, well, why do I have to do that? They said, you always take your wallet out. You put your wallet in your front pocket because these kids will gang up on you and they will take your wallets. They'll take anything you want. And I said, well, what about my watch? He said, them little fingers will slip under that band and break that pin and they'll be gone before you know you lost your watch. So I said, well, there was something else that I had to really watch and take care of. So then, every morning we had breakfast down there. Phil and I would pick up extra oranges, apples, toast, anything we'd find that when nobody was looking, and stick it in our pocket. And we fed them kids. So they were really depending on us down there. And when they said that they were your bodyguard, they were your bodyguard. And any other kids that approached us, they warded them off. Said, no, he's my friend, you go. So we knew everything was going on that was going on. When the kids showed up, we knew that it was probably safe for us to walk because these Vietnam kids, now mind you now, these are 6 and 7-year-olds and they were wiser than my teenage kids whenever they got. I mean, you would think that they were adults, how they lived. They slept on the street, they poured papers, newspapers, and cardboard on them. They brushed their teeth in the fountains and everything. So Phil and I picked them up some toothbrushes and toothpaste and let me see. Yeah, we bought them a couple big T-shirts now and then, just to keep them dressed. So you got to keep these people as your friends, and they did protect us. So then one morning, Phil got up, and he normally showered and got out before I did, because, well, Phil went to bed before I went too, because he said he couldn't stand all the bombing and all the action that was going on in the city at night. He was kind of a pretty nervous guy. Well, I was too, but I'd never tell him that. So anyhow, Phil would go to bed about 8 o'clock, and of course about 4 or 5 in the morning, he was out of bed. So he took off and said, well, Bill, I'll meet you over for breakfast. So then I took my shower and got dressed and went over. And well, you couldn't tell me any difference in me than the military, because I was dressed just like a military. I had fatigues. The only difference is I had a little sign on me that said DAC, which meant Department of Army Civilian. And of course the armies had their own tags and stuff on them. So then I got about halfway over to have breakfast, and we heard all kind of machine gun fire, AK-47 fire. I don't know what was going on because I didn't quite get around the corner, and we could see bullets flying all over the place. And Phil came back, and boy, he was just ashen white as a ghost there. And I said, what the heck's going on, Phil? And he says, well, they had snipers that came over from the palace now, and they're shooting it out with the MPs that had they had sandbags all around the Hotel Rex over there to protect all the military that was in this hotel. So we waited a while, and we noticed that the kids were nowhere around. And I said, Phil, where were the kids? And he said, they were gone. They knew what was going on. and from then on, we took the clue from that. When we went out of that hotel, and them kids weren't there, we knew. You know, we knew we were in trouble. So we really had to watch that. So then, when they took us down to the depot, we went down to a place called the Fish Market. And the Fish Market was along the Saigon River. Well, we soon found out that they were pulling bodies right and left out of the Saigon River over the Tet Offensive. That was exactly when the Tet Offensive was going on, and it was hot. And of course, you know, everybody says, well, is that a VC? Oh, I heard, well, he's dead, so he must be. So you didn't know what they were pulling out of the river and who they were collecting down there. So then I decided, well, I told Phil, I said, let's go down to the fish market and get us a cup of coffee or something here right away. We need to get away from the place for a while. So we went down to the headquarters down there, and I got setting up on top of the building on the coffee shop, and I got looking down on the dock, and there were cases and cases of ammunition, all kind of mortars, ammunition, rounds, and it was stacked up on this dock. Now across the river, believe it or not, the VC owned across the river. They were over there all the time, and with a rocket coming in there, hell, that would have blew that whole post out of the water. And so we asked the guy, says, aren't you kind of antsy sitting up here drinking coffee with all that ammunition down there? And they said, well, no. And I said, well, why not? He said, well, the VC considers that ammunition theirs as well as ours. Because they captured enough of our ammunition over there and used it against us, which is the same thing I talked about in Iraq, that, you know, taking our weapons and stuff over there. So, I mean, this has been happening long before that, of taking your stuff. So then, I don't want to hit too much on my time here. I got to kind of watch. But we drank our coffee, and then us civilians got chewed out by two colonels because we didn't salute them. And of course, they didn't know we were civilians. They just thought we were old privates, I guess. So because we had no sickness on us. So then we got hit in Saigon again with some rockets that they would send in. About every night they'd send rockets in, flares, rockets, and everything. So we said, hey, we're civilians now. We live in a hotel around all the Vietnam people up there, and we need something to protect ourselves. Well, they said, well, no. Said, Bill, you're a non-combatant. So what they did was gave us 2 cards, ID cards, and said I was a non-combatant, and if I got captured by the enemy, I was supposed to give them 1 card, and I was supposed to keep the other, and I said, yeah, sure. You know, as if I'm going to have the choice whether I'm going to give them 1 and keep 1. And they said on the back, for my grade, that I was supposed to be treated like a captain through a major. And I said, well, yeah, that'll probably give me bread and fish instead of just bread, probably, if they treat me any different. So they finally said, okay, we're going to relent. We're going to give you civilians a 45. So here I was, a non-combatant. This card says, and I had insurance too. It says if I get into a combat fight, all my insurance is gone. And they had civilians killed over there where they got in fights, which they proved that they had weapons, and the insurance claims wouldn't pay off to their families. So, but in the time of the Tet Offensive over here, which we didn't know whether we was going to walking down the street, whether it was in the sniper's aims or not. So we decided, yeah, okay, we'll take a 45. So I wore the 45 under my fatigues, and you couldn't really tell I had them. And then they issued, well, they really didn't issue it to me. A friend of mine gave me 2 hand grenades. I had 1 concussion grenade and 1 fragmentation grenade. And we used that in our hotel room because the VC was coming in the rooms killing anybody that was around with the military at that time in the January, February, March time frame. So I said, okay, they gave me a clip. And you know what they gave me? 1 bullet. And I said, are you guys trying to tell me something? And of course, I'm from Morgantown, West Virginia. You guys know where Don Knotts came from? Right. How many bullets did Andy ever give him? So I kind of felt like Don Knotts, you know, I had 1 bullet. And I said, now am I supposed to shoot the door if somebody comes in, or am I supposed to use it on myself, you know? But before the end of the day, I had quite a few clips of bullets down in my pockets when we went back to the hotel. But thank God we never had to use them. So then we came in another day, and all the power was out all over the post down there, and the VC done blew up a lot of the power stations and everything, and it was hot, hot. If any of you guys been in any of them Vietnam buildings over there during that hot time, you know, you got, what, 90, 100 degrees, and the monsoons were coming in. You could get drowned with rain 1 minute, and 10 minutes later you'd be dry as a bone, because that would suck up all that rain just about as fast as it put it on you. And you'd be walking down the road, and all of a sudden you'd be in a puddle that big, you know, all the way up over your boots and everything. And that happened down at the post down there. So I had a major that was working with me down at the inventory control office down, and I was right next to one of the gates came in, and right next to me behind our building was a small community of Vietnamese. They were all tin shacks, anything they could make a shack out of and everything. And we could see them over there roasting their dogs and whatever animals they could get to eat, you know. And then we had 2 Vietnamese that worked in the office down there. But this major keeps saying, well, we got to get our air condition fixed down here. And I said, well, if you give us a little bit of electricity, we can fix that up. He said, no, he said, I can't do it. So the sergeant and I knew I got to hold down the supply end down here. And I said, you know where I can get some generators? And he said, yeah, we can get them up at Long Bend, which is, we had to drive up a long way to the Long Bend storage depot. So I seen a soldier out there that had this great big, it was a 20 kV generator, and he checked all the receipts coming in on the supplies that came in and out of the depot there. And he checked to make sure they had what they were supposed to have. And he had one little air conditioner in his little cubicle down there, who he checked trucks coming in and out there. So I told the sergeant, I said, well, why don't you come with me and let's go up to Long Bend. I said, I talked to Phil. Well, you know, at least I had something in common, because Phil ended up being their director of supply over there. So I had a little in on trying to get stuff I needed. So this guy, Sergeant Donk, says, well, Woody, I'll take you up to Long Bend in the Jeep, but you have to ride shotgun. And I said, well, I'm not supposed to carry a weapon. Of course, I already had a 45. He said, yeah. He said, you're supposed to be a non-combatant. So what? So he said, okay, but he said, you got to ride shotgun and you got to carry this M14. Well, the support groups had M14. Of course, the regular military went up country around and had the M16s. I said, well, shoot, I haven't fired a rifle since I qualified for an old M1 Grand years ago. But he said, well, I'm going to take you up, but you got to be my shotgun up here, because that highway going into Long Bend, it belonged to the Americans in the daytime, and it belonged to the VC at night, the enemy. And we had to get up there and try to find the generator and get back. And Vietnam was really crowded. All that Long Bend highway going up there is all bumper to bumper, ox carts, people walking, bicycles, little putt-putts, and everything else. You're bumper to bumper going up. So I got in the Jeep with the sergeant and we took off. So we got probably about 3 or 4 miles up the road, and then we heard machine gun fire, and then we heard mortars coming in. And sergeant says, I'm getting the hell out of here. So here I was sitting over here shotgun, you know, and because I was supposed to help protect him while he's driving. So he took off the road and went all the way up the road on the side. He was bouncing me around, and all I could do was hold on and everything. And finally, we got out of the fire zone up there, going up the road about 5 miles further, and we got out of the danger zone. He came out and he said, Woody, you didn't fire a damn shot. And I said, hell, it's either that or fall out of this Jeep. So I decided I wanted to stay in the Jeep. But he said, yeah. He said, well, I guess that was the best thing to do anyway. But again, these are just a couple of the dangers that you know, even as a civilian, that you have when you go into a zone like that. So anyhow, we went up and we got a 5 kV generator finally. They didn't have any of the big ones. So we took it anyway. All the 20 kVAs were taken up. So then we went back down to Saigon and back to the depot. So I told Sergeant Donk, I said, hey, let's go down here and talk to this guy who's got this 20 kVA generator. And so we traded him the brand new 5 for his 20, because he only needed the small generator. So we went up to our office, and then the major came up and he says, well, I don't know what you damn civilians are doing up here anyhow. Said you're not doing any good. And I says, Major, we got a job, we're doing it. And he says, my office is so hot down here, I've got to go up to the fish market all the time. That was where the headquarters was. So we said, fine, go up. So me and a couple civilians, we hooked up these generators to the power grid. And since we were such dumb civilians, we didn't hook his office up. So anyhow, we told him his air conditioner was broke and we wasn't going to move another one in there. But we had our coffee in the mornings and finally had a little air conditioning. We was able to make our reports. But every day we would go out and uncover equipment, tag it, put a stock number on it. A lot of it was retrograded and shipped back to Okinawa. A lot of it was unserviceable and all this. This is what we were doing. We was trying to shape up the depot so the GIs could get the material they needed up country. Well, anyhow, we got attacked down there along the same gate that I was working out of. And wouldn't you know, the major was the first one to leave. And I said, now wait a minute, there's something wrong here. So they said, well, Woody, what are you going to do about if they attack us down here? Because we had an attack warning. I said, you want us to get you a rifle? And I said, no. I said, I see you got about 20 guys all down here posted along the post. And I said, if they attack, I said, I'm sure I'll find a rifle somewhere, right quick. So, and again, keep in mind, I had my 45, so that was enough protection. You know, a 45, I probably couldn't hit a heart of a barn door, but I could hit a door in a hotel anyway with it. Because those weren't the most accurate weapons that you had to defend yourself with. So anyhow, we went along, and I went over to the Myra Court Hotel, or snack bar one morning, me and Phil, and we went through our breakfast line. We didn't go over to the Rex. We went over to another one that had a small PX in it. And we went through the line, got us some eggs and some breakfast, and I'd seen these two old guys sitting over here at the table across from us, and they hollered at me and said, hey, you guys come over here and sit with us. And I got looking at them. I said, okay. So Phil and I went over and sat down. I said, I think I know you guys. He said, well, I know you do. I said, well, are you over here with the service club? And they said, yeah, they're putting us up here in the hotel. And said, whenever they attacked the presidential palace out back, which actually my hotel faced the back of it, I could look out and see all the action going on in the presidential palace out there. But anyhow, they said, well, you know, the Los Angeles football team was just over here, and they started all that shooting back there at the palace and everything. He said, I think every damn one of them hid under their bed. So they all went up in their rooms, and they were hiding down here. Well, one guy happened to be a guy by the name of Ed Begley Sr. Now, if you ever watched the old timers, Ed Begley Sr. had an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in, what was it, Sweet Bird of Paradise or something like that. And his son, Ed Begley Jr., played in a lot of medical things. So I said, yep, I knew Ed Begley. And then the next guy, I said, well, I'm glad to see you here, Captain Binghamton. I said, now I feel more safer down here. And that's who it was, the guy who played Captain Binghamton in McHale's Navy was sitting there. So he said, well, we're down here all week, and said, you guys come over here. Says, we don't have too many people coming in. You have breakfast with us every day. And said, we'll be here for a full week. But they was visiting the troops and going down to the medical facilities and all that over there. So it was interesting, you know, to run into something. And then, of course, the old thing, I'd turn my radio in the morning and you'd hear that, good morning, Vietnam. And that's actually happened. that was the radios over there when you turned in the Armed Forces Radio Network. So then another time went on. Phil moved over to another hotel, and a friend of mine from Anniston Army Depot, he, matter of fact, he gave me one of his hats. I forgot my hats here. His name was Bud. And Bud was all right in his 50s too. And we just got turned in bed. And we heard all this noise going on. We heard firing and everything. So Bud and I took off and went up on the roof of the hotel we was in. And it happened to be the Dragons Hotel in there. And this is what I took. This is my picture I took from the Dragons Hotel. You're all welcome to come up and look at this, you know, when, afterwards. But what you see here, these are helicopter gunships. And they're shooting over here at a place called the Racetrack, over in Vietnam, in Saigon. And I'm not sure how many tracers. There's, what, one tracer for every 6 rounds? One of you guys from Vietnam can tell me. You know, I wouldn't. How many is there?
Every 4 rounds.
Every 4 rounds, there's a tracer. So you've seen this before. So you know what I'm talking about.
Many times, yeah.
Yeah. But I let my camera lens open and exposed this. And the hotel I was at, down along here is a Buddhist temple too that I could see. Right behind here was the presidential palace. Now these here are flares. And you know, it's kind of weird when you went into Saigon because the city was lit up all night. They had Piper Cub planes flying over, dropping flares all over, and it was like daylight all the time over there. So anyhow, I took this picture here. This picture, by the way, is in the Pentagon too. But I'm going to donate this one. I gave you a small picture, but I'm going to donate this for your display, your Vietnam display back here. Well, we thought, well, things will simmer down a little bit. We got a little bit in, what, about April, May? We thought, well, we were safe now. Things were getting up. The GI's got everything under control up country and everything. But then I began to wonder because every night I went to bed, or went over to the wrecks and had steaks now and then, we actually sat up there and watched the war right off the top of that building. And you could hear the B-52s rumbling up country. We hear boom, 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 boom. I assume there were B-52s. I don't know whether it was artillery or B-52s. But that's what used to scare Phil every night, was all that firing that went on. So Bud and I, again, we turned in. We had a nice 2-bedroom apartment we moved into, and we had a kitchen and had all the amenities we needed to, because we worked 12-hour shifts. We'd get up and go to work for 12 hours, and then with curfew the rest of the time. You couldn't go out on the street or anything. And we worked actually 7 days a week, just about all that time. Very rarely did we have time. So then during Ho Chi Minh's birthday, we got a surprise. And the surprise we got was in the form to one of the rockets that they shot into Saigon. And these, I was trying to remember, you helped me on this. Were they 40-millimeter rockets they shot? And they were about 6, 8 feet tall.
122 millimeters.
Pardon?
122 millimeters.
122? Well, these are the ones that they put in their bipods. They'd make their bipods out, and they just shot these indiscriminately in Saigon. Well, we heard this thing going right directly over our hotel, which knocked us out of bed right quick. This one here went down a few blocks from us, thank God. It wasn't short enough and landed in our hotel. But anyhow, that was quite an interesting night that night. And you know, when that rocket went over and exploded, let's see, I was what, 32, 33 years old? And you know that 50-year-old man beat me down 6 steps of flights? I couldn't catch up with him. So I told him, well, he probably had more experience running from things than what I did. So anyhow, the next day, I went out, after I took this picture, If you look in there, you'll see the silhouettes of the same buildings. And this one here is still burning the next day, which was left. But little did I know that this caused something else that happened in my life while I was over there. we had civilians staying at that hotel down there. And the civilians, one of them was from Tobyhanna Army Depot. And I didn't know it, but he went AWOL the next day. There was 2 or 3 civilians wouldn't come to work when we got attacked. They were so scared. And I thought, well, gee, these guys, you know, probably first time over there and didn't know any better, but the guy that was missing was one who was in Saigon before with another team, and he was an alcoholic. And once he got the bar girls over there and got drunk, he disappeared. And believe me, there was a lot of beautiful bar girls over there too. See, this is something the wives and them don't tell you anyway. It's over there. They're the husbands. But there was a lot of them around Saigon, believe me. So what he did, he was in that hotel right next to where that went off, which shook the building, and he decided he got his whiskey and he was going to stay there. So the team leader came down and said, "What do you know Ray? You got to go down and get him." And I said, "Hey, I ain't going to get out and get him." I said, Ray's got a loaded gun. He's got a 45 too, and I knew he had a couple rounds of ammunition there, and he's drunk. So they said, "Well, we got to get him out, and we want to ship him back." So anyhow, I got with Ray's team boss, who also was from Tobyhanna Army Depot, and his name was Smith. And Smith said, "Well, I'll go down, Woody, if you come with me, and if you can get Ray's attention, or come up the hallway in the elevator, I'll get Ray's attention and tell him that his daughter's sick or his son's sick, and get him out of the room with his girl in there. And if I can get him out of there, I want you to go in and get under his pillow and get his 45. So we had a plan laid out. We had another guy with us. And John went up there and hollered at him and knocked on the door, and Ray wouldn't come out for a while. And then finally he said, "Well, your daughter's sick, and I had a call from your wife and all this." So finally he came out, and John says, "Well, come over here. I don't want nobody to hear because a few other people's around." And when he did that, I went in and tossed the girl out of bed and got the 45 out from under the pillow. By that time, we had him under control then. So we took him back down to the field depot, and he was shipped out that afternoon on a C-131 with all the bodies that was coming back to Dover. We didn't wait on transportation for him. He did himself in. But then I found out, too, they expelled him from Saigon 2 years earlier when he came over before. So, well, anyhow, I'm getting probably down to the end of my time, but I got out of Saigon and visited my brother in Japan, and then flew back into the States. And of course, that time, I think RFK got killed out in California. Martin Luther King got killed during that period of time. There was riots over in Washington, and there was just kind of all kinds of stuff that was going on. But anyhow, fortunately, from my TDY over there, I ended up with at least enough money, because I didn't have no place to spend it over there, to get my first house anyway for my family and I. So you wonder and you talk. There's one other thing I want to tell you. Each civilian that volunteers on danger assignments, they have different reasons. Most have the same reason that our military personnel, and I'll list some of them to you that was told to me. Some of them would tell you, "I want to serve my country." Good, that's common. By serving in a combat area, I get promoted faster, which a lot of military, that's what they go into the military for, is even, to take care of themselves. Plus the combat pay can help their family at home. My unit was transferred to combat, and I wanted to be part of the team. Being in the military is a family tradition. I want to prove myself that I'm not a coward. There were no jobs at home, so I enlisted Besides, I can further my education through the GI Bill. Some of the reasons, which I thought were bad reasons, I heard too. I want to get away from my wife. I was here before and fell in love with a Vietnamese girl. So I guess these volunteers, those are the most prevalent ones that I run into when I was over there. You know, I had so much that's happened in my 38 career, I could probably go on a lecture tour and not cover the same subject more than once, but I wanted to bring out a couple more things. Well, okay, here's something else that I want you all to look at too. I'll wrap up here in about 2 or 3 minutes here. Here's a photograph of Fort McNair, downtown Washington. You can see the Capitol building here. One of you guys told me you went on the tour of Fort McNair where they had the Lincoln conspirators. And of course, I got a little photograph of the conspirators down here. If you all watch Madam Secretary on TV, the guy who works at the War College in Fort McNair, that's the National Defense University. They refer to it as the War College. President Reagan signed the Veterans Bill right there, and I went down because I worked there in my final assignment. You come on up here, right here in the tennis court where they had the gallows here. There's a jail right in there is where they kept all the conspirators. I'm going to donate this to you guys too, because I know she didn't have anything like this. Up here, further on in, is where Walter Reed did a lot of his medical work up there while malaria was, before that they got the cure for malaria. Now this used to be a prison complex too, years ago. Anyhow, my office was along the row up here, and I could look out my window, and 2 or 3 times a week, the president would jog by my window. They did a lot of their exercise down there, plus they had a 9-hole golf course down here, which they all come. Shoot, I invited Bill Clinton one time, so. But I respect my presidents, okay? I didn't care what political party that they belonged to. But anyhow, you see, I didn't even hardly get into the Armed Forces Inaugural Committee, but it kicks off in January down here at the War College, where all the people get together, the Secret Service, DC Police, military, and all the responders to set up. And this is all under the joint, it has nothing to do with who's going to be president. It's all military. It's military run. They set up the parade route, they set up all the galas, they set up all the security. And if you look at TV while they're having inaugurations, we set all the television sets up down there. And in the meantime, I also got a picture back here of the first computer that was in the Armed Forces Committee in '89 there. So I could tell you a whole story on that, but I'm going to have to get it. I know you guys are. So I better wrap this thing up, but you're all welcome to come around. I can discuss any of these pictures anymore if you got them right now. I only had one more comment though. Remember, this is all about history. Don't let anyone try to change it. And that's what they're trying to do now. Keep it on, keep at it. And all you guys in here are what I call watchers. You guys are the ones who watch history. And you don't let anybody change our stories. I gave Susie a couple of my books here. I have a couple of them left. The bottom one about democracy hijacked. There's a lot of things that's being discussed by all the presidential contenders today. And I bought a box of these in. I sell these for $10 a book if any of you is interested in buying any. And got them all signed. And I just wanted to show you that these coal mining things were, if you look at my dad's picture on the coal miner's son, you'll see those items. He's got one on his head on the hat and his safety lantern here too. Okay, I'm finished.